Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Talking Tunes with Dr. Tony. So, this week I'm going to be doing something completely different than I've ever done before. However, I think I have given you a preview of what I was planning on doing. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some cover songs, and there's been a lot of articles or programs on cover songs, for example, the top 50 cover songs, and those are kind of boring. So I have some specific criteria for these cover songs, and for each song to be eligible for discussion, they must be different, meaning that they have a different arrangement than the original, and they must be considered superior to the original. Now, when we talk about superior, well, in whose mind is that? And of course, it's in my mind because this is my show. But I hope you'll agree that the 4 cover songs that I discussed this week are definitely better than the originals. And I'm going to be covering the years 1967 through 1970. So those are really the sweet spot years for rock and roll. Definitely a lot of good things happened during those years. Now, what I've discovered when I was researching and thinking about these 4 cover songs is I found 2 common threads. And the first one is the Woodstock Music Festival that took place in August of 1969. And the second thread is Dave Mason, the former songwriter, vocalist, guitar player that appeared on a couple Traffic albums and also made a number of solo albums. And Dave Mason is still performing. As a matter of fact, last month in January of 2023, he did play at the City Winery in Atlanta, so he's still pressing on. So the first 2 cover songs come from the same album. And this is Joe Cocker's debut album, which is entitled With a Little Help from My Friends. Now, interestingly, Joe Cocker's second album was called Joe Cocker, so a lot of people think that that was his first album, but it's really his second. And this album came out in 1969, and there were 7 cover songs on this album, and 2 of them were written and recorded originally by Bob Dylan. So the first cover song I want to talk about is entitled Feeling All Right. Now, originally, this was written and recorded as Feelin' All Right by Dave Mason as a member of Traffic in 1968. And this version of Feelin' All Right was on the second Traffic album, and it was simply called Traffic. So right there you have something similar to Joe Cocker, because Joe Cocker's second album was called Joe Cocker, and then Traffic's second album was called Traffic. So as a single from this album, the Traffic version did not crack the Billboard 100, so it was not that well received. By contrast, Joe Cocker's version reached number 69 on the Billboard Top 100, and you may recall that he performed Feelin' All Right live with John Belushi on Saturday Night Live in 1976. And Belushi renders a near-perfect imitation of Joe Cocker's version, and they're performing side by side, wearing the same clothes. So it's pretty amazing. If you want to check it out, you can see it on YouTube. So Traffic's version, by comparison, is pretty wimpy. The vocals are kind of lazy and just lethargic. So Joe Cocker's version starts out with a really good piano introduction, and then there's a guitar strumming in the beginning, and there's piano played throughout the entire song. And the piano player is a guy by the name of Artie Butler. There's also congas on the song, and the vocals are very, very soulful. They're bluesy. They're jazzed up. One thing to note from this recording is that Carol Kay plays bass, and she was a member of the Wrecking Crew that you may have heard of. and they played on a lot of the recordings in LA, primarily in the early 60s. They played on the Monkees, the Byrds, the Beach Boys, and also I believe Paul Revere and the Raiders. So Carol Kaye's on bass. Now the second cover song I want to talk about is from the same album, and it is the song With a Little Help from My Friends. Now you probably know that this was written by Lennon and McCartney, and it appeared on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967, and it was sung by Ringo. And I always tell people, I don't know why the Beatles allowed Ringo to sing, because most of his songs are forgettable. And during this time, George Harrison was emerging as a very good songwriter, but he didn't have really that many opportunities to contribute, so they could have taken all of Ringo's songs and let George Harrison sing those, or there could have been more Lennon and McCartney songs instead of Ringo. So this song, With a Little Help from My Friends, was Joe Cocker's breakout performance. And if you've seen the Woodstock movie, then they show him playing air guitar while he's singing, as never been seen before, or probably ever since after. So there are 50 cover versions of this song, if you can believe that. And this is a testimony to the Beatles' songwriting, how somebody could take that song, which is pretty straightforward, and completely change it up, where it's just a wonderful, wonderful song. So this version by Joe Cocker went to #1 in the UK, and instead of being number 69 like Feeling Alright, it was number 68 in the United States, so it was one better. So this song, this version, has a relatively slower tempo than the Beatles version, and it opens with an organ, and Jimmy Page then appears on the scene playing lead guitar. And this was about the same time that Led Zeppelin was getting started. And the drummer on this cut is also B.J. Wilson, who was the drummer for Procol Harum. Joe Cocker's version was also the theme song for the TV show The Wonder Years. And his screaming, as you probably know, is pretty amazing on this song. I had the opportunity to see Joe Cocker with one of my favorite bands, the Guess Who, opening for Joe Cocker at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles in 2001. So the chorus for this song has a call and answer where Joe sings one part and then the chorus answers in another part. And it's the same thing with the Beatles, where George, Paul, and John would say, "Do you need anybody?" And then Ringo would respond, "I just need someone to love." So that they keep that song structure pretty straight. Okay, so we had two by Joe Cocker. The next song is Woodstock, as released by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young in March of 1970 on the album Deja Vu. Now this song has a very interesting history. So Joni Mitchell, who wrote the song, was scheduled to perform at Woodstock, but her manager advised her against it because she had an appearance scheduled on the Dick Cavett TV show the day after the end of the festival. So the manager didn't want her to risk missing Dick Cavett, so she didn't go to the festival. But she did appear on the Dick Cavett show, and Stephen Stills and David Crosby both joined her right after the Woodstock Festival. And it's likely that Graham Nash gave Joni a report on the Woodstock Festival, and that inspired her to write the song. So it's interesting, just like Joe Cocker, for Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Woodstock was their breakout performance because that was the first time that they really played in front of a lot of people. So after getting the report on the Woodstock Festival, then Joni wrote the song, and she performed it at the very next month at the Big Sur Music Festival in California So that was in September of 1969. So then Crosby, Stills and Nash, they heard that version and they reworked it because her version is a ballad into the rock version that appears on Deja Vu. And I think it's far superior because it's got an excellent lead guitar intro, probably played by Neil Young, and the harmony vocals are fantastic. Now, even though Joni wrote the song in '69 and performed it at the Big Sur concert, she didn't release her version until a month later after Deja Vu in April of 1970 on Ladies of the Canyon, which is an album that I've reviewed in a prior episode. So Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's version reached number 11 on the Billboard 100, and there was a group from England called Matthew's Southern Comfort that also released a version in 1970, and it became the best known version of Woodstock in the UK. And what's notable about Matthew's Southern Comfort's version, it's in between Joni Mitchell's version and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, because it has a faster tempo, but it's not a rock song. It's more of a ballad, but it's very good. So if you've not heard it, I encourage you to check it out. So the final song to discuss today is All Along the Watchtower, recorded by Jimi Hendrix in 1968 on Electric Ladyland. Now, this was the final album Jimi Hendrix recorded before his death in 1970, and this song was written by Bob Dylan, and Jimi covered a few Bob Dylan songs. For example, he recorded Like a Rolling Stone, and you could see that at the Monterey Pop Festival from 1967. Now, on this version, Dave Mason plays 12-string acoustic guitar. So here's another example of the common thread. And Jimi Hendrix's version reached number 20 on the Billboard 100 and number 5 in the UK. Bob Dylan loved this version so much that he started to play Jimi's version live. He was not playing his original version that he recorded, and you can hear a similar version to Jimi Hendrix on the album Before the Flood that Dylan recorded with the band. It's a live album from 1974. So Dylan's version is from John Wesley Harding, and he plays guitar and harmonica, and it really doesn't compare to what Hendrix did with the song. And like the Beatles, this song, this version just shows how powerful a songwriter Bob Dylan was, how so many artists were able to take his song and use them as a basic framework and then update them with different arrangements. And All Along the Watchtower is probably the poster child for that situation. Going back to Dave Mason, he also recorded a version of All Along the Watchtower in 1974, but it's pretty perfunctory. I really don't know why he did it, because he really didn't add much of anything to the song. But in 1978, XTC recorded a very weird version of All Along the Watchtower on their album called White Music. So that's what I have for you today. I hope that you really enjoyed this show. I enjoyed researching it and putting it together. And I encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you have not. I plan on making these videos for many, many years to come. And I'm hoping that they're going to be of interest to you. And I will mix up the format from time to time. I also encourage you to like the video if you enjoyed it. And most importantly is to post some comments. I receive very, very few comments on my videos. And I know a lot of you probably just watch them and that's it, because that's what I do a lot of times when I watch a YouTube video. But I really want to get some momentum going on my channel. So please subscribe, please like the video, and also make some comments. So that's it for today. I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll look forward to talking to you on another episode of Talkin' Tunes with Dr. Tony. Take care.